Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, your home for Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube by searching Tip of the Ice-Burgh, or you can find us anywhere you get your podcast from. I'm your host, Nick Belsky, joined as always by Nick Horwat, and we got a fantastic show for you guys today. The Penguins, unfortunately, are officially, mathematically eliminated from the 2025 Stanley Cup Playoffs. Will it get any better in 2026? We'll discuss that a little bit today. And then, of course, the talk of the town, the talk of every town, is Alex Ovechkin. Well, he did the thing, but does it punch his ticket to hockey's Mount Rushmore? We'll discuss that, and then we'll close things out with one area the Penguins must figure out to compete for the playoffs next season. Let's get things kicking on the Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Before we get started, do want to preface everything with a little bit of an announcement. We do have the 2024-25 Tip of the Ice-Burgh Penguins Awards that will begin this Thursday. We're doing it a little bit different than we typically do. Usually it's one episode with all of the awards laid out, but that usually takes about an hour. And a lot of the times I'm like, you know what, there's a better way to do this. And this year, we're going to hope this is a better way. It'll begin on Thursday. All awards will be voted upon in the posts page at Tip of the Ice-Burgh on YouTube, and we will be doing 2 awards per episode over the next week. So 2 on Thursday and then 2 in both episodes of next week. This Thursday, we'll be announcing the winners of the Rookie of the Year, which, remember, that's not just rookies, so not just guys like Rucker or Gordie, but players that are playing in their first season with the Penguins, such as maybe a Matt Grzelcyk, such as, that's the only one off the top of my head right now. But then we'll also be voting on Team Vezina, which is, boy, the nominees for that one is an interesting category. But nonetheless, Tip of the Ice-Burgh Penguins Awards for the 2024-25 season begin on Thursday. The voting will begin right now. As you're listening to this, that should be available on the post page at Tip of the Ice-Burgh on YouTube. But I digress on that point. Let's get to the remainder of the episode today. The Penguins have been eliminated from playoff contention, something that I don't think is surprising to anybody who's paid attention this season. They were not a playoff team for, I would say, 85% of the season. They've had a couple of weeks of solid hockey in March. They had that stretch from Thanksgiving to Christmas, but at the end of the day, the overwhelming majority of the season was spent with the Penguins being an underwhelming team when it comes to the NHL standards. But they were officially eliminated by the Chicago Blackhawks, similar to the 2023 season, making it 3 straight years without playoff hockey in Pittsburgh. And the worst part about it is they've been getting progressively further and further away each year. It was 1 point back in 2023. It was 3 points last year in 2024. And now, as we stand today, they are 11 points back of that final playoff spot.
It's quite the fall. We went from it was the last 2 seasons. It was just a meaningless game 82. That's all it was. Just a game 82 that didn't mean anything. This year it's a game 78, 79, 80, 81, and 82, if I'm remembering the numbers correctly. It's not just one meaningless game anymore. It's a couple, which is obviously a sign of regression compared to being in the hunt all the way down to the wire last 2 years. And it went on, honestly, probably a lot longer than anyone would have expected. I mean, the East is still extremely tight. I mean, technically, like, this is now getting technical. Technically, the Buffalo Sabres are still alive. But the Penguins joined the likes of the Boston Bruins and the Philadelphia Flyers as teams officially out in the East, yet there's still a tight race up there. For a while, it seemed like no one wanted that second wild card spot. That's kind of what kept the Penguins and Bruins and Flyers pretty much alive up until these last couple of days. It's tough. It's everyone, like you said, pretty much anyone who's been paying attention could have seen this coming. I really am just surprised it led into April, this deep into April, no less, because, we said this season was shot months ago, and it was just a matter of time. So it was just, like I said, it was just a matter of time before it all happened.
Yeah, now again, I think part of that is because of how well the Penguins played towards the back end of March, because they did go on a run there where they were playing really stellar hockey. They were winning games. People were getting upset because Tristan Jarry came up, and I believe he went 4-0-0 in his first 4 games after coming back from the AHL. But at the end of the day, I mean, this team is exactly where they stand right now, which is the 7th worst team in the National Hockey League. Now, you mentioned a couple other teams that are in there right around them: Boston, Philadelphia, Buffalo. There's still a realistic chance the Penguins fall as far as 4th in the NHL draft rankings. But again, it is a tight race, and there's a lot of bad hockey to be played between a lot of those teams. So we'll see how the last week and a half shakes out. But you had something there?
No, I was gonna say there's a lot of bad hockey, but on the flip side of things, I keep looking at the teams heading to the postseason, or at least currently holding down playoff spots, and think there's also going to be a ton of good hockey to watch in general. I think the postseason is going to be so fun, no matter what. I don't care who's playing who; it's going to be an entertaining playoffs. And for every team that's not making it, I mean, you consider the fact that the way I see it is, I think the 16 teams that are sitting in playoff spots right now are going to be the 16 teams in. So that means, teams like the Penguins are going to have to make some decisions. The Rangers are going to have to make some more decisions after kind of stopping making decisions after the Capo Caco deal. Teams like Vancouver, I know they just signed Pettersson and Drew O'Connor to extensions, but suddenly do they have to make more decisions, especially with Elias Pettersson's no trade clause kicking in pretty quickly. It's going to be an entertaining offseason and postseason for a number of teams. I'm just excited about hockey in general. And the Penguins are among that, even if they're not playing. It's going to be entertaining to watch what happens with on-ice stuff and off-ice stuff. So, I mean, there is a lot of bad hockey, yes, but at least there's a ton of good hockey to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, we might see the Battle of Florida and the Battle of Ontario in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. There's plenty to be excited for if you are a hockey fan. And honestly, there's some things to be excited for if you're a Penguins fan. And that brings me to my next question here is, do you think the Penguins turn the tide in the 2025-26 season? Now, I understand that we can have the conversation of, are they a playoff team? And that is at the end of the day, that is the goal for the Penguins, is to get back into the playoffs. But like I mentioned earlier, they've been getting progressively further away over the last 3 seasons. 1 point out, 3 points out, now 11 points. Could be, I mean, as much as 15 points when all is said and done outside of the playoffs with a top 10 pick. Do you think they turn the tide and at the very least get that arrow pointed in a different direction at the end of next season?
I mean, they certainly want to. They certainly don't want to be in the Gavin McKenna sweepstakes. That's for sure. I think it's tough to say that they'll turn it around after this basically gong show they put on this year. But I would think they do a little bit. They're going to be going all out for what could be the last year of Evgeny Malkin. We know Sidney Crosby will not let this team die no matter what. If Brian Rust is still around, we know he's going to continue producing in his way. If Rickard Rakell is still around, he's going to try and implement or replicate what he just did this year. Who knows what happens with the Tang, Karlsson, and the rest of the defense, but we know they're all going to try and be better because they have to be. And same goes with goaltending. Do they manage to do it, though? I would think maybe. I'll leave it at a maybe for now because it still does depend on so many offseason moves that need to happen and what this lineup does look like game 1 of 25-26. I know it's kind of a cop-out answer of just saying maybe, but if it's worth anything, that is essentially me saying, yeah, I think they can do it. Just a matter of doing it and seeing what this lineup looks like.
Yeah, I feel like the answer to this question hinges upon what the plan is for Kyle Dubas, but the plan seems to be to turn the arrow back in the opposite direction. Because if you look at his moves last offseason, you kind of could have read the writing on the walls that they were saying, listen, you're left to your own devices. I'm not really going to help you out all that much, right? I mean, they didn't replace Jake Gensel. Their first line left wing to start the season was Anthony Beauvillier. They didn't really build much on the defensive side of the ice. And really, you look at a lot of the additions, they were 1-year prove-it deals to basically say, hey, if we don't succeed this year, that's fine. We just want to find answers for 2026. And that's what it seemed like. Now, you have to implement a strategy from here onward to be able to execute on everything that you've done. But I mean, you look at the Penguins right now and where they're situated, they could make a lot of noise this offseason and substantially change the lineup that you're mentioning going into the opening night of the 2025-26 season. I mean, they have 11 draft picks in this year's draft. They're not all going to be taken. So what do they do with those draft picks? Do they trade for, different picks? Do they trade up to just try to get one really good prospect, whether that be early second round, late first round? They have a lot of draft capital and they can do a lot of things with that. They have young players that are getting very close to not just making it to the NHL level, but potentially making an impact at the NHL level. We're seeing a little preview of that with Rutger McGroarty and with Ville Koivunen. And the big thing that I'm looking at is they have close to $25 million in salary cap space, and they have zero substantial players to re-sign. I mean, who is their biggest pending free agent right now going into the offseason, or at the very least, the one that's going to cost them the most money to retain if they choose to do so? Matt Grzelcyk, Phil Tomasino. Those guys aren't breaking the bank. So they have the money, they have the opportunity to make a lot of splash this offseason with $25 million. And that's without the possibility of more coming off, right? Or with the possibility of more coming off. If they move on from Jari, they could open up another $3 to $4 to maybe even $5 million, depending on, if they're able to get his full contract off, if they choose to do that. Erik Karlsson is a huge question mark. You'd have to imagine, even if they retain, that's $7.5 million that's probably coming off the books. I don't think they'd retain more than a quarter, to be completely honest. There's been people that are saying, oh, they'll retain half. They're not going to retain half of that contract for 3 years. But a quarter, $2.5 million, that's essentially what you've been paying in retention the last couple of years with Petrie, and I'm missing the other name, but it's Petrie and somebody else that are currently retained.
Riley Smith, and then Jack Johnson. The buyout has another year left after this. But
the Smith and Jeff Petrie, that comes off. If you retain 2.5 on Karlsson, you're still saving money on retention window going into next year. So you could have a lot of money. You could have a lot of draft picks, and you could have a lot of young players that are right at the precipice of making a difference at the NHL level. I have a hard time believing that, matched with Sidney Crosby in another year where he's trying to not just make the playoffs for the first time in 4 years, but trying to do it for Evgeny Malkin. There's going to be a little bit of added, intensity because of that fact. And I understand some people don't want to take that into account. I take that into account considering the competitor that Crosby is, and also the amount that he cares about Evgeny Malkin. I will take that into account going into next year. So I think this was their bottom out year. I think it was. And I think that where you see them right now is the furthest you're going to see them from the playoffs in Sidney Crosby's career going forward.
Yeah, I think so too. I can't predict playoff team right now.
No, you need to see what that is to be able to say that. But I'm with what they have, even without seeing the offseason moves, I'm confident it will be better next year than it was this year. And I know that's not saying much, but I think that it's something that Penguins fans can look at and be at least a little excited for going into the summer.
Absolutely. At bare minimum, I think maybe they're doing what they did the last 2 years next year. They're in the hunt. They're probably not going to make it. We could tell they might not make it, but they're in the hunt. And then maybe it is just a meaningless game 82 again. And that's all it is. Not these multiple games where it doesn't matter what you do, win or lose, because you're not making the playoffs and you're really not going to land the first overall pick. However, if things fall apart next year, sell off what you can. Try and just go for the number one pick as hard as possible, and go from there. But if the plan is to, like you said, give Evgeny Malkin that one last run, then buy up, use up that cap space, try to convince free agents there is something good here. Kyle Dubas needs to go out and convince other players that he's going to work on the proper things to make the team better. And by work on the proper things, I mean, when you're talking to free agents, they're going to be they're going to likely be seeing, well, Tristan Jarry's still around. Oh, we're figuring that out. Don't worry. All right. Well, this guy's we're figuring it out. Don't worry. It's going to be a lot of convincing. It's going to be a lot of PowerPoints to John Tavares style stuff from Kyle Dubas again, maybe. But if that's what it takes to build this team back next year, rather than 26, 27, whenever the kids are really making an impact, so be it. And it's going to be an interesting offseason, because that is always in the back pocket of one more down year, and then here come the kids in their prime.
Mm-hmm. Now, part of those kids might also be a first-round draft pick, which they have potentially 2 of, especially because right now the Rangers are kind of teetering on that 13th overall pick. They're right around there, so we'll have to see where they end up, and if they choose to, even if they go 12th, like you mentioned, Gavin McKenna is a prize next year, and you might want to keep as many first-round picks in your pocket as possible. We'll have to see what happens. But at the very least, the Penguins had their bottom-out year this year, like we mentioned. It's going to net them 1, possibly 2 very good prospects. And when you look at the prospects that are going to be there, they might lean towards players that are eligible to come up and maybe not play in the NHL, but also be able to play in the AHL, considering the atmosphere and the environment that they have created in northeastern Pennsylvania this year. They like what they have there. They like the foundation that they've built there. And if they draft, say, a Porter Martone, he has AHL eligibility right away. He has played technically 4 full seasons in the CHL, which means he's played 4 seasons of 25 games or more. Whereas 2 years ago, they drafted a guy like Braden Yeager, who is still immensely talented, but he only had 2 years in. So he had to have 2 more years before he could play even in the AHL or professional hockey in general. So if you draft a guy like Martone, again, just an example. I like Porter Martone, but I think that if all things are equal, obviously the Penguins are not in a position to turn down somebody who is more talented simply because he's not going to be ready next year. But if all things are equal, I think they're going to lean towards players that are going to be eligible for them to send to that rich environment in Northeast Pennsylvania with the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, so they could potentially get them as early as late next season. Again, and that depends on if they're ready. I'm not sure where Porter Martone is as far as, his NHL readiness, but I'm using him simply as an example. I think that's something you could see the Penguins doing if everything else is equal, is taking the guy that is going to be able to come out and play AHL or NHL right away.
Yeah, that's going to be a crucial choice, and we'll just see how it all goes. And that might even be a sign of what the rest of the offseason is going to look like.
With that, let's move over and talk about something that happened, a little bit of hockey history that we all witnessed this weekend. Alex Ovechkin surpasses Wayne Gretzky by scoring his 895th goal on Sunday against the New York Islanders. A fun little tidbit there is Ovechkin scores 895 against the Islanders. Gretzky just so happened to score his history-making goal against the New York Islanders as well. And also the fact is, when Ovechkin scored on Sunday, I said, oh man, it stinks. I would have liked to see him score at home. When you realized there was 4 days to celebrate, you knew that Ovechkin was not letting it get past Sunday.
That was part of it. It would have been cool to see it done at home, but it is what it is. There was for a little bit there during the first period, it seemed like he was short shifting himself, kind of wanting to do it at home. But when you get another power play opportunity and the shot is there for you, you have to take it. And I mean, that's one of the most iconic moments in the sport now, regardless of how you look at him, or look at the record itself. I mean, sure, it may have been the most reachable of the unbreakable records from Gretzky. I mean, there's already talk about who's next, which goes to show what kind of place this sport is at, which is pretty good. That there's some real talent that could challenge pretty soon. But overall, great fun stuff. Even as fans of a rival, you have to tip your cap to history. And for what it's worth, 42 goals against the Penguins in his career out of 895, which is still just an impressive record. And for what it's worth, it's not the most that he's ever scored against another team. So Penguins got that in their back pocket.
Yeah, there were a couple runs there where the Penguins were able to contain Alex Ovechkin as much as anybody can, because realistically, it's hard to contain the greatest goal scorer in the history of the sport. But there's a chance that he hits 900 this season, and he still has 1 year left on his contract. So 950 is in the equation. If he plays further than that, who knows? Maybe he gets to 1,000. I mean, that is very much so a hypothetical that is way, way down the road. But the guy's scoring 40 plus goals in a season where he's 39 years old and had a broken leg.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, he has 40 plus goals in 60 games or something like that. So I would not rule it out. Like, I honestly, I would not rule that out.
No,
But
he's third in the league in goals right now. Like,
yeah,
regardless of
he missed 6 weeks with a broken leg.
Yeah, regardless of the record or his age, even you missed 6 weeks and you still are third in the league in goals. Okay, that's impressive for anyone to do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think 1,000 happens. That's just me genuinely wondering what else does he mentally want to do in the NHL. If that's one of the things, then by all means. But I mean, he's got his cup. He has a chance for another one, and now he has this. Really, there isn't much left. I mean, I'm not saying he shouldn't, leaving it up to him, obviously, but there's not much left for him. And at this point, he wants to play in the KHL, I think, and I wouldn't blame him. But yeah, I mean, 1,000 could be on the table. We'll see how it goes. I like the idea of 950 though. It's a good round number that's going to make it hard for anyone to grab next.
Now, an underrated, and we'll get to the hockey Mount Rushmore here in a second, but an underrated storyline that I don't think anybody has thought of yet is we know that Evgeny Malkin is likely to finish his career up after next year. Do Ovi and Gino go out together? They were drafted together in 2004. There's a chance they go out together in 2026. That would be just, again, I know the comparisons are always Crosby and Ovechkin. We're about to do it here in 2 minutes, but Gino and Ovechkin, there's a lot of history there, and there's a lot of connective tissue there, and there might be that one last bookend where they end their NHL careers at the same time.
Yeah, there's a lot of good and bad history between the two. It would be appropriate. Like I said, I think they've both discussed and have optioned the idea of playing in the K for at least a season. So it would make sense for them to kind of go out together and each play one more season, probably with their hometown teams.
Now, Gino did refute that earlier in the season.
He did, but it's sometimes times change. You know, like I said, it's not like he's signing an extension in the NHL. So
yeah,
we'll see where it goes. I mean, put it this: essentially, the offer will be on the table. The option will be there,
and no Penguins fan will begrudge Evgeny Malkin if he says, "You know, I want to play a year for Magnitogorsk."
Exactly,
obviously.
So it's those options will be there. I think it almost might be appropriate for the two of them to do something like that. I mean, like I said, with Ovechkin, without much more to accomplish. Same with Gino for the most part. Heck, why not? I mean, I'm not kicking them out of the league because it is still incredible watching these two put together Hall of Fame careers. But for the sake of they've both won cups, they've both won MVPs, they've both won scoring titles, they've both done the thing for themselves and for their teams. They can now ride off into the sunset and do something for their hometowns.
Now, let's ask this question because it's one that everybody is going to talk about because it's one that everybody loves to talk about when anything huge happens with one of the biggest stars of any sport. Does Ovechkin passing Wayne Gretzky in goals punch his ticket to hockey's Mount Rushmore? Now, in general, when you do sports Mount Rushmores or Mount Rushmores of anything, it is a very biased question. So what I say and what you say, Horwat, is miles different than what somebody else will say. Probably somebody in DC will say something different. Probably somebody in Detroit will say something different. Somebody in Edmonton will say something different. But I think when you ask most hockey fans, there are two non-negotiables when building their hockey Mount Rushmore, and that is Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux. Am I off base on that, or do you think that those two are non-negotiables as I do?
I'm with you on that. And a lot of people would have a third non-negotiable. The Mount Rushmore conversation is just an impossible one to have. And then you kind of laid it out there. Everyone's going to have their own biases. Everyone's going to have their own opinions on things. I believe you'd be right with the Gretzky Lemieux non-negotiables. Like I said, a lot of people would say Gordie Howe as well. He's literally Mr. Hockey. But then after that, well, now you're only down to one spot. And even with just two, it's where the impossible nature of the conversation happens. Because before we even dive into it, you start asking the questions, do you have to put a goalie up there? what about a defenseman? Because at least for goalies, that's a completely different position, and arguably nowadays the most important.
Mm-hmm.
So it gets tough. I mean, I think because of the span of history of hockey, you don't need to. But a lot of people would argue it, and this is just one of those conversations where now it is, do you take off-ice stuff into it? Do you take the longevity of a guy like Jaromir Jagr and different leagues into this? If you're building just an NHL one, I think you might take Jagr off, but it's still tough. And this is where the conversation can be had.
Now, you're measuring greatness no matter what. And that's what I think gets lost in the shuffle. People are like, oh, you think Gordie Howe sucks because you didn't put him on your Mount Rushmore. It's like, no, you're literally measuring the 4 greatest players, 4 to 8, I think is probably where a lot of people have 4 to 8 greatest players to ever play a sport that is over a century long.
Yeah.
But I think that the non-negotiables are Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux. And I think that anybody who takes Lemieux out of that equation simply has not paid attention enough because of his greatness, considering the lack of playing that he actually did, right? A lot of these guys, Gretzky even, Gordie Howe, Jaromir Jagr, they have the benefit of longevity. Guys like Mario Lemieux, Bobby Orr did not. So I think that needs to get, especially to Mario, I think that needs to be added and thought about. And that's why I think he's a non-negotiable. The debate to me for spots 3 and 4 are between 4 players. And I don't put a goaltender in there. Gordie Howe is one of the players that I put in that debate. Bobby Orr is another player that I put in that debate. And then it's Ovi and Crosby, because it is hard to talk about one without talking about the other, because their careers have run parallel for the past 2 decades. And the greatness on either side is ridiculous. Now, here's the thing. This is where I say it's biased. Obviously, everybody's going to look behind me and see the Sidney Crosby thing and see the Evgeny Malkin bobblehead and see the Wiz bobblehead and know that, hey, I'm probably going to favor Sidney Crosby in this one. And I will say, I do put Crosby in over Ovechkin because he has more total points. He's up 63 right now. He has more championships. He has more medals, although, some of that is not Ovechkin's doing.
Correct.
But he's also done that in 139 less games when talking about the NHL accolades. If Sid had those games with his career point per game total, he'd have 1,855 points. He'd be 2 behind Messier for 3rd all time right now. He'd be a shoo-in to pass Jagr, and he'd likely become the 2nd player ever to reach 2,000 points in a career. But the thing is, that's if you just measure it to his points per game right now, just his total career. If you look back, he's getting those games back in his prime. So he is probably way past a guy like Mark Messier, because in those seasons, he was going to run away with the scoring title. He was going to run away with the Hart Trophy. But he was cut down because of those neck injuries or whatever other injuries that he sustained early in his career that had us all wondering if he'd even play 20 seasons in the NHL. I think Crosby and the longevity that he's had, the stuff that he's had to kind of go through in his career, and the greatness that he has shown pretty much consistently up until this point and probably for the next few years following this, I put Crosby ahead of Ovechkin in this conversation. With that being said, I give Ovechkin the number 4 spot.
I like that.
And it's tough. It's tough to, because I'm knocking out Gordie Howe.
Yeah.
Like you said, he's literally Mr. Hockey. He is a guy that played 80 games at the age of 51 at the NHL level in 1980. But I look at Ovechkin and I say, if Crosby and Ovechkin are neck and neck, and I feel Crosby edges out Gordie Howe, how do I not put the greatest goal scorer of all time up there? Point blank. There's no conversation to be had. Alex Ovechkin is the greatest goal scorer of all time. You said it earlier. He might have 2 cups after this year. Who knows? But again, it's splitting hairs. And maybe part of this is the fact that I never witnessed Gordie Howe with my own 2 eyes. Obviously, he retired 16 years before I was born. But, that might be the bias there, and maybe I'm way off base. But I mean, it's Gretzky, Lemieux, Crosby, Ovechkin. Do you have a different one? Am I an idiot for saying that, or do you agree?
No. Here's the other part of it too. Like, while there are no real correct answers to this, there's also no wrong answers for the most part. So I'm not going to say you're incorrect in your answer. I also do want to throw out, you said that Gordie Howe retired 16 years before you were born. Consider the fact that he started his career about 30 or 40 before that.
Yeah, he started in the 40s. So
stupid stuff. It is tough. It's an extremely tough conversation. I mean, like I said, I wouldn't begrudge anyone if they said after Lemieux Gretzky, it goes Howe Yager. I'm just not going to do that because, again, you have the longevity for Yager. Even outside the NHL, he's still playing. And same goes for Howe. I mean, that longevity was iconic for the time, and he's the one that set the standard for every player to follow, which, again, makes it tough to move the goalposts almost. For Ovechkin, it is tough to say the guy with the goals record shouldn't be on there. And by all means, he probably should be. And then it does just come down to splitting hairs. I think at this point it's okay to not have Bobby Orr because we're talking about so much greatness. Like that's the way I kind of see it. I get it, and again, that he doesn't have the he doesn't get the luxury of career length. Same goes for Mike Bossy.
Yeah,
Talk about guys having their careers cut short. Same goes for a lot of other greats. So who knows where Orr or Bossy's careers could have gone had they been okay their whole playing careers. But that's just kind of the unfortunate part. And I think where Lemieux gets the bump is because he was able to put up unreal numbers in such a short amount of time. And like I said at the very beginning of this, do you count off ice stuff? Because Lemieux did come in and become an owner while still playing.
I don't count the off ice stuff, but I still put him up there because I think anybody who watched him or anybody who you talk to that watched him would say there'd be arguments that he's the greatest player of all time.
Correct.
If he would have been healthy, then it would have been him over Gretzky. And honestly, again, I'm not going to overly speak on it because I didn't get to watch him in his prime with my own two eyes and get to experience the feeling of, hey, every third night you got to tune in because what's Lemieux going to do? Like I have all of this in hindsight, but you know, I look at Lemieux and I just think that him and Gretzky are hockey royalty. Though that's the top two. And I think that I agree though. Like what you said about longevity, what I say about Lemieux has to apply to guys like Bobby Orr. Like, hey, yeah, he didn't have as much time, but the greatness that he showed in that time, and if he would have been able to prolong that out, to be able to stay healthy and stay in the league, he probably would have been right up there too. And honestly, my only fix to this, and this might be too nerdy of a reference to pull out in this situation, but screw Mount Rushmore. This is my infinity gauntlet of hockey, and it's these six. It's Gretzky, Lemieux, Howe, or Ovechkin, Crosby. That ends the conversation for me because I love Yager, but I don't put him in those classes. I think he's right there next to him though.
For sure. And he's definitely up there. It is just tough to have those conversations. For the sake of brevity now, I will give you a Gretzky, Lemieux, Crosby, and I'm going to still say Gordie Howe, just for the sake of setting the standard for the rest of the league to follow forever. Still known as one of the greats. If you like, this is one of those other things where everyone's going to have a different one. You ask Wayne Gretzky himself, he's going to say Howe first.
Yeah. And
then go from there. So, and not include himself. So it's tough to sort of have these conversations with anyone. But I think Crosby has continued to prove himself and really make a name for himself and exceeding all expectations as high as they already were going into his career. And like I said, just Gordie Howe got the longevity, the numbers that seemed untouchable for his time, and just being Mr. Hockey and the ambassador to the game forever. That's one of those iconic names, those iconic players that it's tough to take off. It's tough to really overtake. And Ovechkin is right there. I'll tell you, he's darn close because it is hard to say someone who has the goals record, the most entertaining part of the game, isn't there.
It's literally the point of the game. Score goals. Yeah. And he does it better than anyone.
And then it gets then things get really hairy because you want to start comparing it because we've seen a lot of these comparisons to where does Ovechkin's goals record rank up against LeBron James's record or Barry Bonds' home run record, because then you start to get into the weeds a bit of, well, what's MLB's Mount Rushmore look like? Probably not Barry Bonds, but is Hank Aaron on it genuinely, or does it go Ruth and then fill out from there? Because talk about a historical sport. That's a tough one. Trying to narrow down 4 guys in baseball. Good luck.
Yeah. So this is always a fun conversation, one I'm sure that everybody is going to have this week. So I'm interested to see who puts Ovechkin on their Mount Rushmore. I'm interested to see if I'm the only idiot that takes Gordie Howe off of the Mount Rushmore, but we will have to obviously wait and see. When I think about other players, and you mentioned goaltenders, Dominic Hasek and Marty Brodeur, I think are probably top 10 players in my mind. Nick Lidstrom has to be on that list, but it's a tough conversation because there has been a lot of greatness in the sport of hockey over the past 100+ years. But even with that, one of the best 100 was Evgeny Malkin. I still don't want to hear it.
No, of course. I mean, consider we also just had this whole conversation about some of the greatest players of all time, and I don't think we mentioned a single Montreal Canadian.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean,
that's entirely true.
Talk about setting the standard. Maurice Richard, every French Canadian's yelling Maurice Richard's name right now.
Yeah. Brandon Gallagher.
Actually, recently, absolutely.
Oh my God, stop. Max Pacioretty. We'll throw that name out there. Maybe Alex Galchenyuk, another Montreal Canadian great.
Sorry, John Beliveau. That's who they're actually shouting.
Yeah, that's probably the number one guy there. But either way, a fun conversation to have, and one that I'm excited to see what everybody says in the comment section, who their Mount Rushmore is. Let's close out this episode with a quick discussion on one area that the Penguins must improve on if they want to get back into contention for the playoffs in 2026. It's going to be a tough hill to climb regardless, right? You're coming from a team that was going to get a top 5 to top 10 draft pick and looked really hapless through most of this season. But you need specifically to excel on special teams. Now, the power play has turned the corner this year. They are, as we sit right now, number 7 in the National Hockey League. A tremendous turnaround that you have to give a lot of credit to David Quinn for. The penalty kill, on the other hand, is baffling to me because it is bad. We can talk about it. It is bad, but there's so much that you look at it and you say, they have the answers. They just don't know how to execute it on a consistent level, which might tell the story of the entire Pittsburgh Penguins organization over the past 3 years. Is the talent is there in a lot of instances, but they just can't do it consistently. What are your thoughts on the Penguins special teams as this year draws to a close?
It felt like step forwards. At least in the power play, definitely felt like a step forward. You couldn't go further back anymore.
It would have been hard.
Yeah. But as for the penalty kill itself, I mean, there was we had a couple discussions over the span of the season of it's doing pretty well. It's doing this right. It's doing this right. It's improving off of last season. And as we draw to the close here, it's kind of fallen apart in every which way imaginable. And yet Nolachari was the unsung hero of the team. He broke the block shots by a forward record in franchise history. So we know he's still doing something right, whether that was on the power play or just a lot of 5-on-5 blocks. We know he was a key piece to whatever success it did have. And then for whatever reason, I mean, also this defense turned into a turnstile at every opportunity. It's tough. It's just tough. I mean, I don't know what mechanics need to be worked on to improve it. I don't know if it is maybe a fault of the coaching. Mike Vellucci, right? Yeah. Don't know if this is Mike Vellucci's doing exactly. We don't know what maybe systems need to change for penalty kill. I mean, also like what kind of systems are being implemented against them? Like what kind of power plays are flying at them? And I mean, the easy case to all of this is stop taking penalties, number one. But that's impossible. It just needs to find the right group, find the right system, and just deploy, I don't know, better tactics. It's tough to have penalty kill discussions because you're already at a disadvantage. It's where do you go from there? How do you stop it? How do you get such a good penalty kill?
Yeah.
No matter, I mean, follow along with what the best penalty kill in the league is doing, but that's also tough.
Well, here's the thing. What the Penguins are doing has worked, right? It has worked. They were 10th in the NHL on January 1st. Now, a lot has happened since then that you can point to personnel-wise as to why their penalty kill has fallen off. I mean, Marcus Pettersson walking out the door is a major, major factor. Because of that, Erik Karlsson has played penalty kill time over the last couple of months. That is the last thing that you want to be seeing, right? Yeah. Him and Letang playing substantial minutes on the penalty kill, it's not a recipe for success. I mean, Letang can do it in spurts, but Karlsson specifically, it's baffling that that's where you've gotten to where Erik Karlsson is playing on the penalty kill, just because it's not his game. It never has been his game. Rotating door at forward. You mentioned that the defense has been a turnstile. I mean, think about the beginning of the season. Who were your penalty killing forwards? Lars Eller, Drew O'Connor, Cody Glass. They're all gone. They are all gone. So you've had a lot of change. You've had a lot of turnover at that position. And the goaltending hasn't been great. It hasn't been extremely bad, but it has not been great. It's not like it's made up for any deficiencies in other areas. So because of that, since January 1st, they have the 28th ranked penalty kill in the NHL, which has them right now sitting around 19th total when it comes to the whole season. The thing is, even when they've struggled, they've had the answers. It just hasn't been on home ice. And that is the most baffling thing to me, is that they have the answers when they're playing road venues. They are 4th in the NHL on the penalty kill on the road all season long, even after all those things that I mentioned on January 1st, even after Marcus Pettersson has walked out the door, even after they've completely changed who they have at forward minus Noel Acciari. They're still 4th in the NHL on the road on the penalty kill. They just happen to be 31st at home. I don't understand why this team can't kill a penalty at home. The answers have to be there. Now, again, who knows what the team's going to look like? Who knows what the personnel is going to be? But the system can't be at fault for that when the system is working on the road. Mm-hmm. So at this point, it feels mental. And I'm not sure how you fix that. I'm not sure how you coach that. But the Penguins have the answers, and they need to find them and implement them more on home ice next year. Because if you're going to have a middling penalty kill with a team that is already fighting an uphill battle, it's going to be very, very hard for you to make the playoffs. So they need to find these answers, and they need to figure out a way to be more consistent and to be able to kill some penalties at home. This maybe not to the extent that they're doing on the road, because they have a top 5 road penalty kill, but they need to at the very least get back into the top 15 at home, let themselves be a top 12, 10 unit in total, because if they don't, that's going to make it just that much harder for them to do the damn thing and make it to the playoffs again in 2026.
Yeah, it just falls into a sense of just figure it out. Just figure it out. You have what it takes. You've proven to do it before. They did finish 10th last year in total. The turnover bit, I think, is also one of the points that escapes me when trying to figure out what could be causing a lot of this and what maybe could help fix it. That turnover is crazy, and I think that may have been a big downfall of it, on top of the defense being a turnstile and on top of goaltending just being a gong show as well. I would say a lot of it will start with just solidifying defensemen and not having Erik Karlsson out there, and goaltending, and then from there, just hopefully not having the turnover, getting a group set, getting the chemistry going, knowing how it's all going to work, and hoping there are far fewer moves next year than there were this year.
I mean, you look at the Penguins this season, 3 of their top 4 defensemen should not be killing penalties. Matt Grzelcyk, Erik Karlsson, and you can make the argument for Chris Letang, but overall, the season Letang's having, I would rather not have him playing substantial penalty kill minutes the way that he has. I mean, you go back, 4 seasons, and it's your top 2 defensive defensemen are Brian Dumoulin and Marcus Pettersson, both playing very high level. And that's the reason that the penalty kill was so good.
Yep.
And now you look at it and you're like, well, we have to utilize our third pairing defenseman as our main penalty killers. Guys like Ryan Graves, guys like Connor Timmins, guys like Ryan Shea, whenever they're in the lineup. So, nothing against those guys, but you're hoping that your top paid defensemen are also good at killing penalties. And that's just not the case with the Penguins. So I know some of this might be personnel, but I mean, despite that fact, I can't I don't understand it. I don't. It's mind-numbing to me that this team can be so good in one area on the road, but so bad at home. It's the same sheet of ice. It's different sheets of ice. It's the same size ice. Similar competitors because you're playing the same teams on the road that you play at home. I'm not sure what that home atmosphere does to them that makes them incapable of killing penalties, but we'll see if they can figure it out over this offseason. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. Remember, you can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy our content, or you can catch us anywhere you get your podcast from. We'll see you guys next time.